Today's episode of the entrepreneurial journey is very exciting. It is the first episode with an international guest, so it's the first episode in English, and today's guest is Paul, who is the founder and CEO of the Detail app, which is the app that we are using to record this podcast here today. Paul is a very interesting person. He's a serial entrepreneur. He has built multiple businesses. He has sold some of his businesses. He's a father. He has kids. He's handling all that kind of stuff. He's building one of the best filmmaking apps ever, and how he's doing all that kind of stuff and what he has learned along the way, we'll find out in this episode. So have fun, and now let's get started with this episode. All right, Paul, so thank you very much for hopping on this podcast. You are our first international guest. I'm super excited for that. At the beginning, because I think probably most of our listeners are not familiar who you are, could you just please introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what Detail is? Because this is actually the app that we're using right now to record this podcast.
Yeah, great to be here. I'm Paul Veugen, an entrepreneur. Started Detail roughly 3 years ago. Detail is an app that makes it easier to produce video, in particular conversational video, like a podcast that we're recording now with the app. We built an iPhone app and a macOS app. Been doing that for a few years. And before starting Detail, I started two other companies, Usabilla, which is feedback on web pages, and Human, an all-day activity tracker for your iPhone. So I've been building companies for quite some while now.
All right, very interesting. So I would say let's talk more about Detail in just a minute. If we rewind the time, like, how did the entire entrepreneurial thing start for you? Like, was it just something that you always wanted to do? Like back in school already, you knew that you have this entrepreneurial spirit, or was it just something that happened sort of? Like, how did all of that start for you?
I always joke that I accidentally became an entrepreneur when I started the Usabilla, my first company, which was about 16 years ago. When I was university at a university student in the south of the Netherlands. I grew up in the Netherlands. Went to university. I've always been building web pages and always been working for customers from an early age, doing like communication type projects and websites and online communication. And during one of these school assignments, I had to test a prototype or a concept. So I had to find a quick way to test a prototype and then sort of get information out of it, improve the concept, and then test again. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that in a physical lab setting with usability testing type tools. There must be an easier way of doing that. So I spent probably about 10 times as much time to build like a first prototype of Usabilla back then, or the idea behind Usabilla, which was feedback on web pages. So you give people a piece of paper and you ask them, okay, put a plus or on the things that you like and a minus on the things that you dislike. And that just quickly escalated and became a company. So I raised external capital from some early investors, some angel investors in the Netherlands. Started building that, hired the first people, had to fire the first people, and turned that into a business bit by bit. So it was literally almost like accidental. I think I've always been interested in entrepreneurship and always been interested in sort of building something out of nothing and sort of creating things and working sort of on bigger projects. And sort of my personal company is called Make No Small Plans. And I think that's sort of a little bit like the red thread through what I've been doing in the past years.
All right, that sounds very interesting. So did you also have like a proper job? Like, have you also been employed in the past, or did it start like after university? Because you know we're joking about this, but for many people that are starting out, and especially for people that are doing things that we do, such as that are creators, you know, that doesn't really feel like a job. Being on YouTube and creating content and working with businesses like you have, like, it doesn't really feel like a proper job. That's why I'm asking, like, did you have a proper job before you started your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I did have like part-time jobs as a like when I was at school and at university. I start working very early age, and I think if I would have grown up like 10, 15 years later, sort of in my time, that was sort of designing web pages and doing like online communication. There was no social media yet. I was well, grandpa talks, but sort of around that time, sort of there was social media was coming up. It was not like sort of communication in itself was building a website, right? Sort of everyone needed a website, and sort of around that time, you saw platforms like Twitter and others coming up. So I think sort of that type of work is what I've always been doing. And I did get a job after a while. So my second company, Human Fitness Tracker, got acquired by a US-based company, which was a typical, they call it like a talent acquisition. So they basically hired our team and bought our product. And that was the first time that I actually had to work within a larger organization. It was a team of about 150 people when I came in, and I had all kinds of different responsibilities. But until then, I only worked in smaller teams, like sort of a handful of people up to a dozen different folks. And that was my actual first job. So that was about like sort of 7 years ago now. But I've been working for about a decade already before I got my first job.
Interesting. How did you... The first business that you started, you mentioned that it was giving feedback to websites, basically, right? Like, how did you come up with that idea? Have you been coding before and found that as an issue for yourself, or did someone else tell you like this would be something that would be great, or like how did that start for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were selling websites back in the days to companies, and it was the early days of like agile development. So what you tried to do is sort of websites initially were very much like campaigns, like big marketing campaigns. So you would buy a website and then you would be done. And we tried to sort of sell the idea to our customers back then. And this is when I was like 17 or 18 years old. I was working for this local company, and we would sell these websites, but then there was no repeating business. So it was pretty challenging to get like repeatable business out of our customers. And at the same time, sort of selling a website and then sort of doing the same thing 2 years later doesn't make a lot of sense if you're sort of trying to get better as a company as well, if you try to sell to your customers in their case. So what we tried to get them sort of to buy in on was the idea of continuously improving. And so shipping once, and then instead of buying a full new website, just improve what you have and sort of get better every single day. But around that time, the only way to get like insights on what to improve was doing like usability testing or the analytics. And Google Analytics back then was also very different, right? You had very limited tools at your disposal to make that better. So that was like the spark of the idea behind Usabilla. What if you wake up to new feedback on your website every single day, and that could help you to improve every single day? So you had like A/B tests as an example, so testing version 1 against version 2. But before you have version 1 and version 2, you need to know what goes into those versions. And that's what eventually became like a full product suite of collecting feedback on live websites and waking up to new feedback every single day. And it was a little bit like I always described it in pitches as a Trojan horse. So once you're implemented, so once you have that like 2 lines of code on your website, if we would sort of sell that idea to you, then you would wake up to new feedback every single day. So it was, from like a business perspective, it was a very easy sell for us. Once we're in, we knew we would give you great insights from your customers because we could control the inflow of information, and that was a great way to get better every single day. And it's a little bit the same, sort of very different market, but when I started Human, the fitness tracker, was a little bit the same. We built a Trojan horse. So you installed on your iPhone, in this case, the iPhone 4 when we started, and you sort of just keep it running in the background, and we'll help you get more active every single day. So instead of throwing metrics and stats at you and sort of trying to sort of change your behavior by just giving more information, we would just tease you sort of with the ideas like that you see in the Apple Watch nowadays. And notifications if you're sitting still for too long, notifications if you reach your 30 minutes of activity every day. So it was a little bit like a Trojan horse as well. So you install it once, and then we start playing that game together with you.
Awesome. Very interesting. Coming back just one more time very briefly to the first business that you had, like how big was that business? Was that just you? How was that going? For how long did you have that? Do you still have that? Did you sell that? Like how did that go on?
Yeah, so when I started, sort of it's a long time, 16 years ago, I started. I built the first team, the first product, and around the time that you call like product market fit. So around the time that we had this product that we could sell with these like 2 lines of code on your website and waking up to feedback every day. That's the time that I realized, and how did I end up here? As in, this is like a market that I'm not really passionate about. I can still sort of talk about it with a lot of passion, of course, and I still sort of I'm excited for what we've built back then. But it was sort of, I found myself presenting on stage at usability conference, and I think, what am I doing here? This is actually not sort of, I like sort of the product that we build, and I like the team, but the market that we operate in is just not really my market. And then at the same time, it was tough to turn it into like a machine, like building like the enterprise sales engine around it. And in the end, everything is enterprise sales. For a lot of like software companies, they start with selling individual subscriptions or smaller deals, and then they sort of move up market and they become like enterprise companies. And that was the phase that we're in. So we knew that if we wanted to make it a success, we needed to sell to big corporations and getting in a car and physically selling the product. And I just didn't see myself doing that. And that's when I asked a good friend of mine to take over. My last deed was scaling down the team from about a dozen people back to, I think, 4 or 5. So it was really tough. But that gave them the runway they needed to roll out like to do like a big commercial rollout and start selling the product that was sort of ready around that time. And they just executed like maniacs. Every target that they set themselves, they hit. But I was no longer involved day to day. So I was just in the background. I sort of at their disposal whenever they needed me to do like a presentation or to show up for something. Later, I became a board member, but they built it into a massive success. And then they sold the company about 3-4 years ago now to SurveyMonkey, which was a survey company. For, well, I think the total deal was close to 100 million. And that was like sort of a huge success for the existing team, for the investors. And that was also like a really great outcome for me personally.
And how was your process? How did you manage to give your baby, so to say, to another person, to give the responsibility to someone else to do the daily business?
Like a Band-Aid. You have to rip it off. Well, I think what really helps was that I deeply trusted the person that was taking over, right? So Mark, I hired sort of Mark initially as a CTO on our team. I tried to get him in way earlier, but it took a while before I could convince him to join our team as a CTO. And we'd been working together for quite some while, and we've been good friends also before. All right. So we've been friends for a long time. And when he took over, I just knew that was exactly what the company needed, as in his operational rigor, persistence, patience. So in some ways, maybe almost like the opposite of what I am and how I think and operate. So I think that made things a lot easier. When we made the decision that he would be doing it, that's also when I basically after selling the idea to our investors and other folks involved, when they approved and agreed, or agreed and approved in that order, that's also when I basically just handed over the keys. And I've been that was a very hard line almost, as in if he's going to take over, then he should take over, right? And I should not get in the way of him. To build this into a massive success. And if I want to give him a fair shot at doing that, then we need to do things differently than I had been doing it until then. Otherwise, I can stay on as well, right? So give him the ultimate opportunity and be as supportive as possible. So I've been in the background, I've been supporting him, but from the moment that we made the decision, he was in charge. And I started the company by myself. But from that moment on, it became his company, right? And I think that was really important, and I think that was one of the main drivers for their success, because they could own it.
And at that time, when you handed over the keys, did you have any idea of how much potential this entire business has and what was gonna come in the next following years? Because with about $100 million sale that you said, like that's a massive thing. It's not like I'm handing over a business that's making 100,000 per year. That's like a real big thing. Like also how
Well, when I handed
like,
it over, just to sort of like put it in perspective, when we made that transition, there was, I think, in the order of magnitude, I'm not exact, sort of, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but in the order of magnitude, like 50,000 or maybe around that order of magnitude in revenue per year. So sort of what I handed over was like sort of like a very, very early stage company with a lot of promise, with a lot of investments being made in product and sort of with early ideas and branding and positioning and customers that liked our product. But it was very, very small. And we did invest 4 years, and me personally, I invested 4 years of my life in getting there. And I really truly believe that there was a lot of promise, but that promise was still sort of very much promise, right? Sort of it's like a probability. And I think that's a part that folks also often forget when you read like headline stories about success or headline stories about exits or companies that are doing great. Sort of it's like the early days that are really, really tough. And same for them, right? When they took over, it was like sort of 4 or 5, and I think up until the very end, it was just a really sort of, it is a grind, right? Sort of you have to sort of put in the effort, you have to sort of pull above your weight constantly. And then if you're really, really lucky in the end, you might get a great outcome. And I think that's sort of same for human, same for detail now, right? Sort of it's very, very early. I was joking just before the recordings, and I hope this all goes well. We've sort of just shipped this new feature of recording remotely, and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into sort of the state that you currently see in the app.
a very interesting story. And just to ask one more time, like at the time you handed over the keys of that first business, did you have any idea like how much potential this still has and that this would, become this big in the future? Did you imagine that or believe in it, or like how did you?
I think I always
personally
believed in it, right? Sort of, and back to like make no small plans. I always believed that it could be massive. The thing is, you're not really focused on that, and you can't really count on it. Sort of, I remember that sort of after about a decade, we started having these conversations about like a potential acquisition and sort of seeing if there would be other companies interested in what we've built as a business and technology. And I remember that sort of in those weeks, months, sort of you start building like a long list of companies that could potentially be interested, or you start engaging first with companies that help you to sort of do a sell like that, and they build like a presentation, and they go after like potential buyers, and then sort of there's a long list and there's a short list, and then suddenly there's like this moment in time that there's companies putting in a bid, and a bid is basically like a potential bid. There is always like a caveat, and it's never like a signed deal, even if they put in like a formal bid. But then that was the very first time that I saw numbers, and I thought it was whoa, okay, so it is indeed really valuable that we or they built, right? There's indeed like a massive value and opportunity for other companies to invest in this and make this a big part of their product offering and make more money of it. In my mind, that was still like sort of I remember my first desk. It's like these typical origin stories, right? I had like a small desk in my student dorm where I started building this, and there's 12 years of work that went between all these steps with dozens or hundreds of people involved. And then there was that number on a sheet of paper that they put in. And then eventually it became a real deal with my signature and sort of all the other investors with a formal signature under it. And even then I couldn't really believe what the impact was. So I don't think that I fully realized or dared to sort of count on anything until the moment that there was like money hitting the bank account. And that's a little bit the same for building a product in general. From the earliest days, when you start building something, you start charging like consumers or customers money. The fact that they're willing to pay for what you've made There's something really special about that, but it's still it is weird, right? Sort of, I'm looking at our revenue numbers now with detail, and I think, wow, actually so many people that sort of like what we're building and it works for them. And that's the first time they actually realize that there's value in your product, and there's a little bit of like a reality distortion that you believe that it can be massive, and then sort of we want to build the next Adobe. I think there's a lot of opportunity to build better video software for people, but you have to have like a almost like irrational belief to pull that off if you just get started with the first lines of code.
Wow. Do you have, looking back, like you mentioned that you handed over the keys to your partner. Did you just take a step back as CEO and founder, but did you still own the business, or did you also sell your shares of the business?
Yeah, what I did is I still sort of at that point I owned a significant part of the business, but I also knew that in order to make it a success, the other folks should own a significant portion of the business as well. So I did sell a significant part of my stake to the new folks taking over the business. And at that point, sort of, because I knew they should feel the same as I did, as in feel like an entrepreneur and taking it over, even if they didn't start the company and sort of weren't there for the first 4 years, it should feel as their business. And that's what we made sure of. That was part of like the transition. And I was able to keep a significant portion of my shares. And that sort of allowed me to do other things later.
Yeah, maybe transitioning over to the next to your next venture that you started. Could you just explain a bit more, like what was the functionality? You mentioned it was with the iPhone 4, so that must have been like, I don't know, more than 10 years ago, probably.
10 years ago.
Yeah, 11 years. I think roughly 11 years. So we looked at like so I came out of Usabilla and sort of, I literally physically sat down in the bathtub. And I had sort of, okay, I have about 4 weeks of personal runway, because sort of at Usabilla, out of the 4 years, I maybe got like a salary 1.5 years. And that was like a sort of, compared to most of my peers, that was just like minimum wage type salary. So I had about 4 weeks of personal runway, 4 to 8 weeks. And I had to come up with either like find a job, or sort of start a new company, join another company or something like that. And I wrote down the markets that I was interested in. And after spending time in like the usability testing space and user research, I thought, okay, I want to do something different, something more meaningful. And health and fitness was always like an area that I was really interested in. I've been always active, or at least tried to be very active. With kids became a little bit less active, but I've always been like avid athlete. And most of the products back then were really good at giving you like reflecting on what you've done, but none of them looked forward. And sort of you would get like stats and metrics, but none of them would really help you change your behavior. So that works very well if you're intrinsically motivated, like the typical entrepreneur, or someone who's sort of really sort of like has this internal motivation to do better every day. But there's also a really big group of people that just needs a little bit of help and needs a little bit of coaching there. And that's why we pay personal trainers and have all these programs, and why Weight Watchers and other companies work very well. But in fitness tracking, you didn't see much of that. So we looked at the market and we saw the FuelBand and the Fitbit that they came out about a year before we started. And we looked at those devices and thought, well, there's nothing in those devices that's not also in your iPhone. As in, there's motion chips in there. They don't even have GPS, and the iPhone did have GPS, but you couldn't use GPS in the background. So you couldn't do any background tracking. And that's when we started building like with a hack, we built a way to do all day activity tracking. So to use location service in the background of your iPhone, which back then was just a completely crazy idea, because it would drain your battery in roughly 4 or 5 hours. So we found like a group of people that were willing to donate battery life in order to help us improve our tracking and build like a better product over time. And that sort of eventually led to sort of, how can we turn this into a gameplay? If we have all the activity tracking, what if we wouldn't show it to you? right? What if we would just move that all the way to the background and try to sort of build the gameplay around that? So if Apple and Google, they eventually will build this, right? We build it. We had to build it because that's what was needed to build the product. But eventually, tracking will become a commodity, and we will build the gameplay on top of that. That was like always like a one-liner out of our pitch deck to investors as well. And that's what we did. So we built the tracking, made it just good enough, started building the gameplay around it. We came up with the concept of 30 minutes of activity every day. So it's the best thing that you can do for your health. Moving like casually, at least 30 minutes. I don't care if that's emptying the dishwasher, going to the shopping mall to walk circles, taking your kids out. Sort of all activity counts, and we're gonna help you reach 30 minutes. And that was like the concept behind Human, with all kinds of notifications and like a fun gameplay. But then we got stuck in simplicity. It was just too simple. It was too sort of polished. Everything that we would add to the app would make it harder. It would take away from the simplicity. So it was really hard to turn it into a viable business. And that's sort of after 4 years of just blood, sweat, and tears, we decided, okay, this is not going to be like massive scale, massive business opportunity. We raised some external capital. Let's look for plan B.
And what was plan B?
That was the talent acquisition by a company in the States. So I grew up in the south of the Netherlands, moved to Amsterdam, like I think 16, 17 years ago. And we started talking to all these US-based companies, and most of them, or some of them, were interested in like the technology that we built. Some of them were interested in the team. And so after 4 years, we knew, okay, this is not going to be like a home run health and fitness tracker. We did make some revenue, and we saw like reasonable growth. We had about 200,000 monthly active users and about sort of, I think, 10,000 paying users. But in the end, sort of, we didn't see ourselves doing that for another 4 years with a team of 4, just sort of grinding every day. And that's when we got to know the team of Mapbox, which is a mapping company in the States. And they make, for example, the technology that I think in Uber Maps, they are using their technology. They're not using formally their maps, so they're not paying for it, but they use some of their technology. Snap Map is built with Mapbox, the Weather Channel, and a lot of others. But around that time, they needed to move into mobile. So they sold most of their maps on web, and they needed to transition into mobile development. And we built like a mobile app with their maps, and that looked like something they really, really enjoyed. So we became the poster child for their implementation. And we knew how to do tracking. We knew how to do like an anonymous background data so that we could build a real-time map of the world. And that real-time map of the world eventually became part of Mapbox. So as a team, we joined them. They acquired our technology, and we started helping them building other parts of their infrastructure. So it came in at 150 people, inherited a team of about 5 engineers. And then we sort of started growing the company together. Had a super fun ride there, just learned a ton. Moved to San Francisco as part of the deal. And my entire team joined me, and I got different types of roles in different parts of the organization.
You had quite a journey already. Like that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I sort of it's not like when I describe some of these things, I realize that wow, indeed, sort of I did quite a few things. A lot of that has just been driven by doing things that I enjoy doing, and the same goes sort of how the fuck did I end up at Mapbox in San Francisco, right? Sort of like. I grew up in a smaller city and sort of spent some time in Amsterdam and tried to build my own company. And sort of that company wasn't working back then, or at least that was building, and they were growing and they were doing their thing. But those timelines of Usabilla that I just described, like the 10 years of them building their success, happened in parallel with me building Human, right? So there was quite some overlap. And then suddenly I was just sitting in like a boardroom in San Francisco with a company with like a sort like founder, someone who sort of just started like a decade before that and was just trying to make it happen. And I think we just really hit it off on that front. So he knew that he would get like entrepreneurs in his company, folks that would just try to whatever it takes. And I had a lot of fun helping them in a different type of role. And I still feel very lucky that I could spend like 2 years in San Francisco working there as well, and building it out 3 years in total, 2 years at Mapbox.
And how did that end then? Because now you're obviously not in San Francisco anymore. Like, how did that split up, or was this a contract over a specific time period, or?
No. After 2 years, I was just completely done. I think for the same reasons that I was excited about joining, and sort of the CEO of Mapbox is still, I would call him a very good friend. But after 2 years, it was time for me to move on, right? Sort of, I think me being very stubborn in many ways, and sort of, I think that there was like an expiry date on me within an organization like that. Sort of, I just knew that it's either we're gonna do it my way, or we're gonna sort of execute on sort of things that I think should be done, or it's time for me to make room for you or others. And I think I did a short like stint after Mapbox at another company where I helped them also with a bigger transition and sort of on product engineering and go to market. So I helped them sort of transition to another type of business model. But in that period of time, when I was in San Francisco, towards the end of it, my first company, Isabella, got acquired. And I remember sitting behind my desk and thinking, well, okay, I'm making my 40, 50-hour work weeks here, but I don't technically have to do that anymore. I can do whatever I want, at least for a little while. And that's when I continued to work for the company that I was working for at that point, Color Health. But it was also, okay, I want to start investing in early stage companies. I want to sort of start looking at starting my new company again. And I couldn't do that up until that point because I was living in San Francisco. I needed to support my family. I have 2 young kids. My wife initially, when we moved to San Francisco, wasn't allowed to work because of visa situations. She could finally work, so it was her turn to actually enjoy like the benefits of working in an ecosystem like that and learning a ton. So it was a little bit like, okay, this is my time to sort of, okay, pause a bit, and that next company that will come eventually, but at least I need to have some financial stability for now. When that changed, so when I had the financial stability, I just knew that I wanted to start a new company. And I also knew that if I wanted to start a new company, I didn't want to do it in the Netherlands, or I didn't want to do it in the States. I wanted to move with my family back to Europe and start my new company in Europe, and not so much in San Francisco, for a lot of like personal but also business reasons.
Yeah. How I guess like how long was that entire time period of starting that first business up until now? Like how long is that? 10 years, or how long was that?
So first company was 16 years ago. Second company, Human, was 11, 12 years ago. Then sort of Human, I was running for about 4 years. Spent 3 years working for other companies, and then already 3 years ago I started Detail. So it's again like sort of there are these like batches of 4 or 5 years that I've been working. Human or Detail in that sense, sort of my latest company, also feels like a very different beast in that sense. When I started the first one, it was accidental. The second one was on purpose, and I had these ideas and sort of bold plans. And now I'm sort of, on one part, I'm really impatient. I want to sort of get going and sort of even more sort of passionate to make it happen. But I now know what I signed up for, right? I know that it's going to be like sort of a decade at least before you start seeing meaningful results potentially. Might go faster, but sort of it's very likely that sort of things take longer, and that it's going to be a long journey to get to something that sort of, in hindsight, sort of, if I look forward, it looks like that's the thing that I want to reach. But if you reach that point, then it's sort of, well, I want to get even bigger. So there's always this like hunger to make it bigger. And I now know that it's going to take a while, and I'm very patient for whatever needs to happen.
Maybe you can walk us through the process. So when you start, or when you have the idea for a business or for a product, how did you start? Like, do you search for developers? Do you code by yourself? How is this process like from the very first idea to a version 1 product?
Yeah, maybe walking you through how I started with detail in that sense, right? So I sort of landed back in the Netherlands. I knew that I wanted to start something new. I'd been keeping a long list of markets that I'm interested in, and I think for me personally, I also knew this time that like there's a category of problems or a category of like almost like technical things that I enjoy doing, and I know that they need to be like consumer product focused. I don't necessarily needs to. I'd rather not do consumer products because for a lot of like reasons that's really complicated. But it is about sort of building like a new unique experience, and I built that experience by looking at technology that there are these things that suddenly are possible technically. And as an example, if I think about the reason why I started Detail is about 3-4 years ago, we hit the tipping point that you can process 4K video in real time. So you can do like 4K video frames at 30 or 60 frames per second, and you can process that in real time. So you can enhance the picture in real time. And the same goes for like sort of you start looking at that, that means that you can start doing speech to text. You can do image recognition. You can do like rendering in real time. And around the point that the M1, M2, or the first M1 Mac came out, but also the iPhones, like the models of about 4 or 5 years ago, we went from depth masks, like portrait effects on your photos, to portrait effects on real-time video very quickly. So there was a tipping point in technology that changes how you can start producing video. So for me, that's the type of problem that I really sort of, or like an opportunity that I really enjoy, because suddenly there is these new layers of technology that become commodity. So they become like building blocks, developer building blocks that you can use to build a unique new consumer experience. And that's sort of, we did that with Human. We did that with Usabilla. Like Usabilla live feedback on live web pages, when we started, was pretty impossible. But by the time that we were developing, we could use that to build this real-time feedback thing on your website. Tracking, technically impossible when we started, or almost most people thought it was impossible. We built it, became commodity, and we could build like a unique experience around it. And with Detail, it's the same. Our promise is that we can produce video in real time. So when we started 4 years ago, our goal was to produce better video in real time. So we started with a virtual camera plugin, we added rendering, then we went from rendering into recording, from recording into like sharing video. And now, like three years later, we're getting close to the point that after we stop recording this podcast episode, we can produce a fully edited episode. We can make it look great, we can render it, and you have a video that you can share. And that doesn't mean that you would only do that. You can still go into the editing mode, and there's a lot of creativity that we want to support. But the main mechanics of producing video completely changed. And that's the type of stuff that I enjoy. So that's also how I picked the problems that I want to work on. I know that sort of this is deep, like all the way into the weeds of like rendering technology and how frames work, and vision request, and sort of what we can do with image recognition and speech to text and other things, and then turning that into like a unique product experience. And then the market needs to be big enough to care. Oh, well, if there is a market big, sort of the number of downloads for CapCut show like the massive size of video, right? So the video in itself, sort of, if you think about the Office suite of the future, where we used to make like sheets, pages, and presentations, video is a part of that, right? So if you think about any form of communication, any form of media, and the way that changed, sort of like folks like you are building a business, like you're building like media empires. And I think that in itself, there's so much great opportunity, a reshuffle of the market and the ecosystem, empowering, like one of the like statements that we use is we want to empower the next 500 million creators to produce better video faster. That's a little bit like sort of what we want to go after. And that makes it a super interesting challenge because there's a lot of opportunity. And I also think there's a lot of opportunity to do it better or different than other companies, because most video editors still look very much like the video editor that we've been looking at for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something when I started using Detail. So when you guys reached out, or I think you guys reached out, I can't remember really, but when I started using that for the first time, like, you know, we get inquiries almost on a daily basis of different apps and gimbals and whatever that we should test out. So most of the time, the products are shit. Sorry to say that, but most of the time they just really suck. And when I started using your app, because I saw that you're in Europe and I just wanted to give it a shot, like I was really blown away by the technology that you're putting in, by the ease of use, by the just how consumer friendly it is. So I do think that you are on a very good path. And yeah, I think it's just important to keep on going and to reach more and more people and to get more people to try it out once. Because in my opinion, or in my experience, like by the time they use it once, it's pretty hard to go back and to use something different, because yeah, it's just super fast and super easy.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing it. Sort of almost sort of while you're building this, you sometimes forget like where you are already. So hearing other people like describe our product is always like just it makes me really happy, and I'm gonna sort of mostly forward this to the rest of the team as well, because we're working. It's not just me working on this, right? It's like a team of 12 people who really care about their craft and trying to make it better every single day. I think you're 100% right. It's one of those things that, and maybe that's one of our biggest challenges, right? Sort of you have to see, you have to try. It's sometimes really hard to explain what makes us different. And there's like there's product philosophy behind what we do, right? So that we try to make it real time. So it's what you see is what you get for video. So we mix the camera and a video editor. But if I explain that in words, then people are sort of, what the fuck does he mean? And I think that's one of the challenges, sort of getting folks to just try it once and then see and experience it. I think then you sort of see how it's different than most of the other apps out there.
Yeah, absolutely. How does the marketing for you guys look these days? I know that you're working with like influencers. I don't like to call myself that, but you're working with YouTubers. What else do you do to get more people to try it out and to hear about you?
Yeah, so initially we started making there are two main channels, right? So it's content primarily, and App Store. So App Store optimization, being findable, sort of making sure that if people search for the right keywords, they will find our app. That's like a big pillar. And the second pillar would be content. Most of the biggest volume of traffic is folks finding us through our content. So we produce a lot of content ourselves. That was a very, well, you know the drill, right? So it was a very frustrating experience to start producing videos about 2 years ago and then seeing like 10 people watching it if you're lucky. And keep doing it. And I think it made it a lot easier that we produce these videos also to test our product. Yeah. So the best way to make the product better is just to use it. So I was sort of, when I was doing my own videos, and Frank, a colleague, and Lexi, other colleague, and Agnes, so I always keep reminding ourselves, and hey, it doesn't matter, even if no one would watch this video, it's going to help us better understand the problem that we're trying to solve for other people. Mm-hmm. But then still, if no one is watching your videos initially, it's going to be pretty frustrating. But now we're seeing, after like 2 years of content production, that we're getting most of our downloads through our own self-produced content. And that's mostly the long tail of content. So we built like our YouTube channel. We have like an Instagram channel. We're doing some on TikTok. We have a lot of web content that we produce. We're tracking like how those work, and we call it internally, we're mostly focused on keywords. So we try to map the keywords that people are searching for. So it's mostly search-based traffic that we're successful with. So we map the keywords that people are searching for, like the problems that they have, to user needs, like solutions in our app. And we try to do that in an elegant way. So our best video is, for example, how to make a reaction video on YouTube in 30 seconds. And it's a YouTube short. That YouTube short, I always joke, it's the gift that keeps giving. It's one video that is constantly on the top of our list. I made that myself while testing a new feature in the app. Was before that feature was out, and I was on vacation with my family in Spain, and I had 30 minutes before lunch. So okay, what I'm gonna do in the 30 minutes? So I just made that video in less than 30 minutes, shared the draft with the team, published it on our channel, and then nothing happened. And then after a while, sort of it picked up by the algorithm and it started ranking. And it's one of those videos. We have a few of those. It just keeps going. So it's super funny that became sort of videos like that became a really important acquisition channel for us. And same goes for a blog post that we have where we explain how something works. So it's a lot of content that we produce ourselves. And then sort of part of that is also teaming up with other creators, but we're really sensitive who we team up with. And we really try to make that like a match for our audience. And I just don't like these like paid to play type things where the product just feels like a mismatch for their audience. So, and we also see very mediocre results for most of these partnerships. So I think a lot of like greater partnerships or influencer partnerships are just not worth it for us. Don't mean to dismiss their work, as in they're great, but the impact from a video like that on our business is not significant enough to pay for a partnership like that. And sometimes it's like a hit. And I think the video that we did with you and the type of content, I think it's such a natural fit for your audience. Yeah. And it's super fun because beyond like sort of like the partnership that we set up, there's also like great input that we get from people, and sort of they share feedback and they start trying it, and sort of it's not about that transaction in itself. It's about just reaching the right people and making them see just a glimpse of what you can do with us.
Very interesting. How do you find motivation to keep on pushing? Because it feels like you have like endless energy, and you had a couple of businesses before, and also with like the frequency that you guys bring out new features in detail, I think is just spectacular. Like I think in November or something like this, you released the feature where you could do like dual recording with two iPhones if they're in the same Wi-Fi. And I think that back then, that was still like a beta feature when I tested that. And now 2 months later, we're here using that feature that's also brand new. So how do you do that?
I think the number one reason is that I really enjoy what I'm doing. And so this is not like... my excitement is not fake in that sense. And when I think about what we're building, and sort of even like a conversation like this, the fact that I can spend my days doing these types of things, I'm just incredibly lucky. And why? Because I can do that with just a stellar group of people. I can work with incredibly smart people from all over Europe and one in Canada. Some of them I've been working with for a long time. Others are new to detail. And every day we are just trying to sort of focus our effort to make it a little bit better. And sort of it's in that sense sort of you're crafting something, right? So you take a lot of pride in product. At the same time, sort of I also have a lot of other things going on. So my family's number one. I've been doing, the only way I can do this is if this does not hurt others. And of course, it's like a thin line, sort of. As in, I could, of course, always spend more time with my kids, or spend more time with my wife, or spend more time with friends. Sort of building a company like this, you have to go all in. You have to sort of give it all. There's no easy way of doing this, and it's a long, like it's a marathon in that sense, and it's multiple marathons. It's like an ultra run, and another one, because it just keeps going. But at the same time, I put like family on for like position one, and my own health on in that same realm, because I know that everything else will be absorbed. Every sort of waking hour, I'm already thinking about this. That's already like challenging. Sort of, it's hard to put it away and not think about it. So if I focus on the things that are most important, which is like family, health, friends, then the rest will automatically be filled with detail already. So the way I try to do this is by focusing on the things that actually matter most, and then just let it go for the rest of it and keep going. And that's the motivation to build something like this. That's very much like, that's intrinsic. I don't need much external validation to do that. There are periods of time, like sort of about 1.5 years ago, where that was really tough. As in, so we were flatlining in metrics. We built our Mac app first. It was really hard to reach the right audience. We had like interesting response from the market, but it was just flatlining. And every month we had like the same sort of number of people coming in. And those periods of time, things are a little bit rough, and it's harder to sort of, I believe in myself, but if other people start questioning that, it might be a little bit harder. And then there is this spark or something that happens after all the effort that you put in. It's sort of like this, one video that works very well if you would be a YouTuber, and that's just worth it. right? So it's like, that's a little bit like the validation that I needed. Thank you so much. And it doesn't need to be much, but you do need like a little, like sort of, you need these sparks of hope, like these slips, like thin, like sort of promising that one response from a customer that says, well, this is the ultimate CapCut killer. I'll take it. Thank you. That's sort of, this is going to be my next 2 weeks. I'll be celebrating that. So it's just the small things that really help to keep going.
Yeah, that's something that Alex and myself talk a lot about because we're two founders. So that's also something that we talk about with many other entrepreneurs that are alone. Like, did you, when you started Detail, did you start that again, like only by yourself, or did you have any partners starting that? Or
Yeah,
was
I
it
have two
just you?
co-founders in Detail, and both of them were with me when we were building Human. And that's the world, right? Sort of, there is deep trust between the three of us. They know exactly what they signed up when they started Detail with me as well. They sort of, we know each other, and we've been working together we'd been working together for a decade already when we started, right? And I think that makes a world of difference, and that makes it a lot easier. And I'm typically like the face to the outside world for a lot of ways, but not behind me, far from behind me, but next to me, there are two amazing other co-founders in the company that also pulled our weight in different areas, and that I deeply trust, and that helped me to turn it into success. And beyond those founders, there's like a great group of people who all care equally about what we're doing as well, and all of them also have like a small stake in the company, and the fact that you can do that with a group of people, I think that makes it so much more fun.
Yeah. I think we couldn't agree more on that. Like, I guess we sort of have the same situation basically, but we're not three people, but just the two of us. Like with us, it's basically the same, especially with the entire smartphone filmmaking thing. Like, people only know myself, but Alex is doing like exactly as much as I do, just behind the curtain. Well, not next to me, but behind the curtain, so you can't see that in the outside. And that's also with the podcast. We try to, share that it's not just myself. And yeah, now also we have a team member that just started working with us last week. And yeah, maybe one more question that I have for you, because you mentioned family time and handling that and taking time for that. Because I think we both noticed that, like, the bigger things get, the more opportunities come our way, and the more we're working. And it started off like, when we quit our day jobs and started only doing like the courses and started our agency, like we didn't have many clients, and we just were producing videos, and we sort of had like a 40-hour week. But now, since we have like, I don't know, 10 agency clients and a couple thousand members in the smartphone filmmaking community, and we have live calls and coachings and things, and it just gets more and more, and we're basically in office 7 days per week, and we don't have kids yet. So do you have any tips on like how we can, I don't know, set different rules with our significant other, or just so that we're prepared for the future?
I'm not sure if I dare to tread there. He said, no. I think for me personally, I've often seen entrepreneurs use their business and their business success, or sort of periods of time where it was not successful, as an excuse to fuck other things up. And so this is not like personal advice to anyone in the room, or sort of any of like you personally, but I think sort of it should never be an excuse, because if you want to do this, and if you believe in long-term success, you have to find a great way to combine the things that you care about, right? And if it's just your business that you care about, well, then you have your answer as well, right? Sort of, but then that could be sad as well. For me, I just know that sort of I care really deeply about like family life and my family. There are points in time that sort of, simple example, why on earth, if I work also when I was working for like employers, why on earth is the 5 to 7 p.m. time slot a time that you should claim as an employer from me or as a colleague? That's the only moment in my day that I'm blocking for my family, and it better be worth it, right? Sort of if I sort of miss dinner with my family, sort of I'm having dinner, I bring my kids to school every day, I have dinner with them every evening, and there, of course, like every now and then, there's like a dinner with like other folks or with friends or whatever, and that's worth it. But typically, there are a lot of like time in my day that I can allocate and put like sort of as a priority on my calendar for my family. And everything else is already taken. So there's more than enough time to fill with other things. And I think those are examples sort of. My friends always joke that I was like the worst person to invite to a party because I would leave the party at 10 p.m. with the message that I had to do my taxes. I would evaporate all the fun out of the room if you would invite. And that's sort of, they're good friends still, and sort of I know where it's coming from. But that wasn't. There were moments in time that was true, right? Sort of, and only when they became an entrepreneur themselves, they said, "Well, I actually know what you're talking about because the 31st, sort of that tax that needs to go out for the quarter, it needs to happen, right? Because otherwise you're not always planning ahead for some of those things. So I used it as an example. Sort of, there are points in time that sort of I left the party at 10 p.m. to take care of something, or because I wanted to take care of it the next day. So you do have to make sacrifices if you want to be successful. And I don't think that there is any way around that. And if people make you believe that it's the other way, well, sure, that there are different types of, but at least I don't know how to do that without making some sacrifices.
Yeah, couldn't agree more on that. I think finding that balance is super difficult, especially. I think everything that you said is 100% true. You just don't, you cannot lie to yourself, and you just, yeah, take time for the things that are important. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's also sort of, there's also not like equal perspective on what's important, right? So the things that I find important might be totally unimportant for other people, and that's fine, right? Sort of I know that if I wouldn't enjoy the things that I was yesterday, I was having, it was like a party, and sort of I didn't go. But my like father-in-law said, "Well, Paul shouldn't work that much." Well, sort of maybe it's more stressful for me to be at a party like that than to work a few more hours on a little side project, as an example, right? I deeply care about like my family, but I'd rather go out for dinner together with them than showing up like at a birthday party if I have the chance. Doesn't mean that I never go there, but sort of typically I do try to be focused on where do I get my energy, what do I enjoy, how do I sort of balance all of these things. And yesterday I was working on a Sunday, and not because it was sort of also a great thing to work on a Sunday or because you work so many crazy hours. A lot of those hours just don't feel like work, and that's just almost like a hobby that I enjoy. And I'm never counting hours. I don't think I work a lot of crazy hours if I would sort of start counting. But it is like a big part of my life at random points in time, except for dinner time, morning, and a lot of like family obligations.
Yeah, I very much feel that. Like yesterday, I have been hiking with a couple of friends in the morning, and then when we came back, I just told them that we just recently got a new office, and if they wanted to just check it out very quickly. And then I saw that Alex was working in the office, and then I was working in the afternoon and evening. I was just brainstorming and writing. I just enjoy these things on Sundays when just no stress, no emails, no calls, just doing the thing that I want to do on that day. And then I also got a call from a friend, and they were asking me like what I was doing, and I just told them that I was working, and it was Sunday, like I don't know, 8 p.m. or something. And they also told me the same thing that you just said, like don't work too hard and enjoy the time. But I did enjoy that, so it's just like a fine line.
And there are phases, right? I think there's also, for me personally, there is typically phases where I sort of they're almost like a sprint, or you can keep going. And then I also know if I'm pushing that too much, that I need to take a break afterwards, right? And I would just take some random days off, or I'm going on vacation quite a bit. I'm spending a lot of like vacation and family time with my family. Some of those vacations I bring my work. Some of the vacations I try to turn off. Sometimes I'm really explicit about it. Sometimes it just happens. So I think in that sense, just finding like something like a balance that works for you. I don't think it's like a strict line, and especially not a strict line between weekdays and weekend days, or between like 9 to 5 and beyond. If you're an entrepreneur, I do try to balance that for the team. So I want to make very sure that no one feels obligated to respond to messages at random points in time, because I decide to work in different hours doesn't mean that anyone else needs to have the sense or the feeling that they should work as much as I enjoy doing. Because for others on the team, it is just a fucking job. I'm really clear about that. I hope it's one of the best that they can have, but it is just a job, and it's not worth it. It's just not worth it to sacrifice a lot of things on this. For me personally, if I wouldn't enjoy it, I could easily set more strict rules for myself as well, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, Paul, I think there are like a million more things that I would like to talk with you. If it's fine for you, let's call it a day for now. And maybe we can schedule a second meeting where we have like, I don't know, another session, because I also, you mentioned the investing thing, and we do still have like a million different questions. But if it's fine for you, let's just do that in the future.
It's funny. Next time we're gonna reverse the tables, and I want to interview you both as well. I'm working on like a small podcast myself called Obsessed, and I think a lot of the things that we touched today around sort of entrepreneurship and such could be covered there as well. I would love to hear more about your story in that sense as well.
We would be more than happy to join that. And also, like the app is working fantastically fine. So congratulations on that. So there have been no lags at all. It has been working perfectly fine. I know that this is not the standard, because we have been recording a podcast in November or so, and I have been using a different software on the MacBook, and that was laggy as fuck. So congratulations.
Yeah, it is a massive challenge. So we'll just get better every single day. Thank you.
Yeah. And you're doing already very good, and now that we know the spirit and the motivation that you have, I'm sure it's gonna be even way better than it is now. Maybe one last thing, like where can people find out more about what you are doing?
Yeah, so the best place to find it is at detail.co, or just directly download it on the iOS App Store. Search for Detail or Detail Video, and you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, we will also put it down below in the show notes. And thank you so much for hopping on this call, and let's do a second round soon. Thank you.